Hi everyone, welcome back. It's been a leisurely day for me today. I've not really done a great deal on the plot. In fact, I've just arrived and it's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm hoping we're going to get some rain, but looking at the weather forecast it looks as if it's going to be restricted to the south of England today on Tuesday. We might get something coming in from the west tomorrow on Wednesday, but who knows. But it's mild anyway, and a little bit cooler. Light breeze blowing, and it's comfortable in the greenhouse. So I thought I might do a little bit of sowing this afternoon, but as luck would have it, just before I set off from home I received the parcel from Mole Seeds, and this is the standard packaging that you get, and these are the seeds that have come. They all come in a nice golden foil wrapped packet. Not all the items that I ordered have arrived as yet. There are a few more things still to come, but I've got some dwarf bean borlotto, tinto retto, which is like a red and white variegated bean, if you want to call it that. I just thought I'd try something different, and I've got 250 grams there. I shall do a flat bottomed drill again. It's a dwarf French bean, so we should be okay there, and there's more than enough to last 2, possibly even 3 years with those. Then I've got some winter squash, and it's the variety that I always grow, and this is an F1 hybrid hunter, and I panicked earlier in the season. It was actually, I think, just the start of Easter, and I thought I'd already got this seed but discovered I'd not. I'd used it all. I went online to see if I could buy some, because obviously most of the garden centres up and down the country are closed, and I couldn't find them anywhere. They were all sold out, or the websites of the larger seed retailers were closed completely over winter for 2 and in some cases 3 weeks. Luckily Mole Seeds had this seed, and they also had kohlrabi as well, which is another seed that I was lacking. I thought I'd got that as well, and I hadn't. Yeah, I rung them after Easter and they came within about a week. So the other items that we've got are lettuce symphony, we've got some pak choi, 2 different varieties there. I've grown some pak choi already, but I wanted to have seeds for later in the year as well, moving into the autumn. And it sort of makes you think, really, doesn't it, when you're in a situation like we are at the moment. It's bad enough to go into the supermarket and find half of the shelves empty, and you know, all the non-perishable goods missing, like pasta and rice and so on. That didn't bother me quite so much as it did to discover that there'd been a run on a lot of the seed as well online, and I did kind of panic a little bit. So all the more reason, really, if you can, to save your own seed, or if you're going to use an F1 hybrid, which obviously won't grow true, then buy it in bulk. So I've said it before and I'll say it again, you know, the seed here, this dwarf French bean seed, will last a good 3 years. So if you get a big packet, half a pound or a pound or even a kilo, you can grow enough to feed a family of 20 for a season, 3 seasons in a row, just from 1 packet, and it might cost you £12. So that's nothing really. I noticed someone else on YouTube made the same point about Mole Seeds. It might have been, I forget his name, Mike. Anyway, well, I'll put his YouTube channel, Michael Brotherton, that's it. I'll put his name on in the show notes. But it's definitely the way to go. So as and when I've got resources available during the remainder of this season, I'm going to think ahead for next year and buy seed in bulk, and I'm going to make a determined effort to save my own seed as well. And ideally you need heritage or open pollinated seed varieties. So yeah, got some nice, it was a nice present, nice thing to receive today. And the lettuce that I ordered, which is the variety Symphony, is a red frilly lettuce. And I just thought it'd colour things up a little bit and add a little bit of variety, because I typically grow these varieties that I've got here to the left of me. You maybe can't see them, you've seen them in previous updates, the mixed Oriental and the mixed red and green. Really reliable, fast growing, cut and come again. You can cut twice, sometimes 3 times. The Oriental has a tendency to go to seed quite quickly, the mustard, so you have to make sure it's well watered. But I'm going to try Lettuce Symphony, and that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to show you how I sow the lettuce. Okay, catch you in a minute. Right, so I filled a watering tray with multi-purpose compost, and this is the kind of tray that I use. It's not drained, so you have to be careful when you water. It's about 7 centimetres in depth, and I've filled it to within about 2 centimetres of the top edge, and I've lightly tamped it down with my hand. And the compost that I use is Westland multi-purpose compost with added John Innes. And then what I do is I take the seed, and I've probably taken about 1/6 of the packet. It's a 10 gram packet, cost about £6 or £7 I think, might have been a little bit less. Probably a couple hundred seeds there, and then I just sprinkle it over the top, probably from about a foot in height. So make sure it's well covered, put plenty of seed on, make sure it's evenly distributed as well. And I've put enough on, and I've not used all of the seed. I've probably used 3/4 of the seed that I had in my hand. So I'll pop that away, and there'll be enough seed here probably to do another half dozen trays. And from that one tray I would imagine I'd probably get about 6 cuts, because as I've said before, it's a cut and come again, and you can generally cut it twice, sometimes 3 times, depending on how thickly you've sown it. So that's really good value for money. And each bag that I fill would probably cost you a couple of pound at the supermarket. So you've got about, I would say, 12 or 14 pounds worth of lettuce leaf, and it's probably cost about £5 or £6. And it's clean, it's homegrown, and it's there when you need it if you keep sowing in succession. So all I do then is I take a fine sieve, get some more compost. It doesn't need much over the top, just a couple of millimetres really. So the seed will sow even if you don't give it a light dusting with compost. It's tiny seed, it's in contact with the compost. Quite a bit of debris left over. I'll just put that to the side. It will get used, that it'll get put in bigger pots. And then all I'll do is I'll take a fine rosed watering can, and I'll just moisten it, and you're good to go. So this one was Symphony, a red cut and come again variety. Well, I thought I'd devote the second half of this update to a brief discussion about tomatoes and how they're grown. You can see mine are all here, there are about 70 plants. I started all of these on the 18th of March, and that's typically the date at which I start, in the middle of March, allowing 8 weeks or so before the last frost, which is generally a good marker whether you're growing them outside or in a greenhouse, because you know that by the time you plant them out into the final positions, you know, if it's really cold overnight, even in a greenhouse, you're going to be pretty safe. I've got 3 varieties of tomato plants here. I've got cherry, beefsteak, and just a couple of standard, you know, what we typically think of as tomatoes. They're nearly all indeterminate varieties. That means they'll just keep on growing until they're killed by the frost or by disease. And typically I stop them out probably at the end of July or something like that, because I've got enough trusses on the plants. I had a comment today on the last update that I uploaded, and someone asked me whether or not my tomatoes had been planted a little bit later than normal, because theirs were quite a little bit more advanced. And my answer to that was, well, no, actually, I'm just doing what I always do, start them in the middle of March, and I look for a stocky plant by the time I come to plant them out. And as I say, that's typically about 8 weeks or so. Obviously it depends on the season, the lighting conditions and how well they're growing. These are grown in a cold greenhouse. I don't have any heating, although they are germinated in a propagator, and propagation normally takes about 3 to 4 days. If you look at them, they're pretty equal in size. They're about 5 inch high now, and it you know, it doesn't matter whether they're cherries or beefsteaks or standard varieties, but some varieties are, I've got one down here, quite a bit slower, and this one is black pear, sown at the same time, but tiny seedling, and I transplanted this along with, well, pricked it out I should say, along with the other tomatoes, but it was too small and I lost a couple of the plants. They kind of died off, but I think I've still got about 3, but they're a beautiful, they're like a plum shaped tomato, and it's very prolific. You get lots of trusses and lots of plum. They're about egg size and really sweet, a gourmet's favourite. Yeah, I guess the thing I wanted to say really was, you know, there's no rush. Once your tomatoes come into fruit, if you're lucky, if the season's good, you're going to get about 3 months worth of tomatoes. And if you grow cherries and beefsteak and standard tomatoes, they will grow throughout that period of time, probably from early July until the middle of October, something like that, and you're going to get fruit. A typical cherry, like a Zakura or a Sungold, well, they'll be the first to bear fruit. And I'm not sure about the Zakura, but I think the Sungold, which is this one, this takes 65 days to grow from planting out to maturity, to bearing fruit, whereas a tomato like a pink brandywine, which is hidden here somewhere, like this one, that can take 100 days. It's a long season variety. It can even, some take even longer than 100 days. It can be 110 days. So you can extend your growing season by growing different kinds of tomatoes. The cherries are always the first to come, and your beefsteak will probably always be at the later end of the season. Although you can, if you're lucky, you can continue to get, if you've got a mild autumn, you can continue to get some cherry varieties like Sungold well into October and maybe even November, although the taste won't be as good if you've not got good light. And that's the other thing, light is key, and also not to overwater. So you need to be on a really clean windowsill when they're at this stage, or in a greenhouse or a polytunnel. And this greenhouse is yet to be washed, but ideally you want to make sure that your windows are clean. But before they're planted out, all the greenhouses will be washed, so that they'll not be knocked back. The other thing as well that I've seen some growers do on YouTube, and it's, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say this is the only way to grow, it's horses for courses. Some people will pot on 3 or 4 times, and personally I can't really see the point in that, because each time you move a plant on from from pricking out to a slightly bigger pot to a bigger pot, each time you do that you're knocking the tomato back a little bit by maybe 3, 4, 5 days, because it has to recover, it has to acclimatise to the soil, and its roots need to get used to the soil as well. So what I tend to do is I'll take a module tray, seed tray with maybe a dozen cell units in it, and I'll grow a different variety, maybe 5 or 6 seed in each one. After maybe a week I'll prick them out and they go straight into this kind of pot, and that's I guess maybe a litre pot, or I think it's something like that, but it's 5 inch across the top. And my tomatoes stay in that from pricking out until the middle of May when they're planted out. It's generally the first week or the second week in May. And I use a mixture, as I've said in and shown in previous updates, I use a mixture of multi-purpose compost and John Innes No. 1. So there's plenty enough feed in there. They don't really need much at this stage. They don't need to be overwatered either. And you can see I've got these on growing trays, which means you can water from the bottom. So when they're particularly small, the seedlings, you don't want to be applying lots of water around the top. You don't want them to damp off like cucumbers. But actually, growing them in seed trays like this is not the best way to do it. You are better on a slatted bench because you get better airflow around your tomatoes. So the cold air, rather than falling onto the tray and sitting there, it can kind of pass through the plants, through the slatted bench and down, and it'll cycle around warm air. And the air as well will, as it passes through, will also help the pots drain. And the other thing as well is you need to keep your pots about 6 or 8 inch away from the window, so they're not next to the cold, and you're also facilitating airflow again. So these are my tomatoes, as I say, about 70. I'll give about 20, 25 plants away, and the rest I'll plant. So how do you grow yours? I mean, if by now they're up here and they're healthy, that's fine. If you're moving them outside when you plant them out, as they do in North America, you can trench the plant, you can bury a lot of the plant and bend it up and allow it to grow on. You can use a really deep pot, a 35 or a 40 litre pot, if that's how you prefer to do it, and sink, take off the bottom leaves and sink the plant in. It's all good. They're a very, very resilient plant, and some of the best tasting tomatoes that I've grown have come from neglected plants, ones that I've had in the garden that have barely been watered, in a good summer with good light. I've almost forgotten about them, just kept them going when I've remembered to water, and they've tasted fantastic. But the key to taste is light and sugar production. So make sure your greenhouse is clean. Make sure, if you can, you site your greenhouse without any obstructions around it so you get good light. Don't overwater. Try and keep them on the moist side, but not sogging wet. Allow them to dry out a little bit sometimes as well, but basically just keep them moist. Side shoot, and in 3 months' time or so you'll be enjoying a bumper crop for tomatoes. So I'd be interested to see how you grow yours and what works for you. What soil mixes or what varieties you're enjoying. My favourite varieties are Brandy Boy, which is a hybrid beefsteak, Hillbilly tomato, which is an orange and yellow tomato, and I do like Black Russian as well, and Paul Robeson, and they are black varieties. As for the cherries, I like the Sun Gold and I like the Zakura, because the Zakura cherry, it all ripens on the truss and you can keep it on the plant till the last tomato ripens, and every tomato on that truss will taste really nice. So they're my tomatoes, and I hope your tomatoes are doing well, and that's it for this update, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Okay, all the best, cheers.